And I'm going to ask, I don't think Annabelle's here yet either. So I'm going to ask, Stephanie, are you here? Are you there? Stephanie, come back, Stephanie, with the Rape Recovery Center. There you are. No, where'd she go? There you are.
I am. I was trying to figure out my camera, but I just kept unmuting and muting myself. So.
It's so nice to see someone as young as you doing something like that. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Right. Stephanie, I'm going to time you, sweetie. You've got 5 minutes, and give us the issue and tell us what we can do to act upon it.
Great. So my name is Stephanie Mcgann. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Rape Recovery Center. So our organization has been around for almost 44 years, and we work to empower those victimized by sexual violence through advocacy, crisis intervention, and therapy, and to educate the community about the cause, impact, and prevention of sexual violence. I've actually met many of you, including Representative Stackman-Moss, in past legislative sessions. And I know that a lot of you and a lot of people in this organization are very involved with this issue. So thank you for that already. As always, the legislative session, and really it's even just from hearing the little bit of this meeting, these next couple of years are going to be exciting, for lack of a better word.
Sorry.
Or surprising and also tiring, right? And so we're going to be probably reacting and trying to be as proactive as possible on a lot of issues. But the big issue that we are really pushing for, and this is probably not going to be the most exciting issue, is that of prevention education. So for the last couple of years, the state legislature has funded Utah statewide prevention initiatives. What these initiatives do is that they allow organizations like ours, organizations like Planned Parenthood, and local organizations like the Boys and Girls Club to provide prevention education that teaches healthy relationships to our youth. What we know is that most sexual violence happens before the age of 18, and unfortunately it will happen by someone that child or teen knows, whether that's an intimate partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or someone in their own family. So we know that prevention education has to happen before the age of 18. The funding that has taken place over the last couple of years has been one-time funding and never guaranteed. So what we're hoping for this next year is to provide ongoing guaranteed funding. This will happen through the Appropriations Committee. We are working with some of our state legislators to ensure that is supported. But we also know that this year, as every year, funding is tight, and there's a lot of controversies about how our public money should be spent. And so we are asking for the support of our community to ensure that gets passed, and that we really push to ensure that Utah is ahead of the curve nationally to ensure that our children are protected and that they receive the information that they need. I spoke really fast because I was on a timer. So that's my pitch.
Well done. Well done. What I'm going to ask Representative Moss to speak on this in a minute because she's been deeply involved. But from your perspective, Stephanie, what could we as an organization do to support your effort? You got like 30 seconds to let us know.
I think highlighting. So one of the biggest pushbacks we get is we don't want our children to learn about sex. And one of the things that we can say and that we want to clarify is that prevention education is not about sex. It is not even really about consent necessarily. It is about ensuring that children have the information that they need to protect themselves and to protect, their families. And so that's probably the biggest thing. In addition to obviously contacting your legislatures, contacting the Appropriations Committee, but also, sharing on social media and talking to your neighbors and to your families, right? Because it is this middle 35 to 55 conservative Utah that has that misconception that we're going to teach these awful things to their kids, and we're not touching that at all. What we're doing is ensuring that these kids have the resources they need, and that if something did happen or does happen, that they have the resources like the Rape Recovery Center, like Planned Parenthood, and like all those resources that are there when things do happen, and unfortunately they do.
Thank you. That was terrific.
Can you provide a link to your program information?
Yes, definitely. I put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's in the chat. Representative Moss, I'm going to ask you to come in on this because you have been such a champion in this area. I'm not surprised that you and Stephanie know each other.
Yes. Well, thank you. And thank you, Stephanie. What I'm working on for next session to continue what I started last session complements what Stephanie and Rape Recovery Center and all the organizations she mentioned, and plus Prevent Child Abuse Utah, who have very good programs that go into the elementary schools and start in an age-appropriate way, teaching kids how to protect themselves and how to create boundaries, and about good touch and bad touch. And those are outstanding programs, and we just have to see them funded. What I was doing last year and failed, unfortunately, because of one word, consent. It had that in the language, but the right wing, Natalie Klein specifically, took that word, just like they have taken other words, and turned it into something ugly, like they have with CRT. And consent, as she sent out to all her followers with lies, was, I wanted to teach kids how to consent to have sex. So you can see this year, you won't see that word in there. So it's not consent education, it's health education amendments. And the concepts I'm going to tell you now briefly that will be in the legislation can already be taught in health classes starting in 7th grade. It's just that they're not in statute that they must be. In other words, they meet the standards that the state board sets, but putting them in statute will make it required. And let me just briefly list some of these things. This would require the state board to establish curriculum requirements that include instruction in sexual assault resource strategies. Because what you said, Stephanie, the age at which many kids are first have some kind of sexual assault, sexual violence behavior prevention. And then it says they would start in the 7th grade in health classes, and then the kids take it sometimes junior year or senior year. So at least twice. It ought to be more than that, but that's when they have to take health. And what this really means is that these are tools, sexual assault resource strategies, for addressing the physical and psychological effects of sexual assault. And what we want students to understand in sexual violence prevention education is that no individual has a right to touch another individual without that individual's permission. Do you see how I use the word permission and not consent?
Nice.
All about language, folks.
Tricky.
And this would, it has to do with boundaries. That's what we teach young kids too, that they have boundaries. You don't have to kiss Uncle so-and-so at the family reunion, or even grandpa. Or if you don't like some kid's arm slung over you, all the time, you just say, please don't, take your arm off me. It can be anything that invades their boundaries and makes them uncomfortable. And to teach them how to communicate this to others and how to respect other people's boundaries. And then this is the part that I think is most important. Provide information about the early signs of coercion, emotional manipulation, and grooming strategies. That's what it's all about. That's what kids, including my own children, who unfortunately had sexual, I don't want to call it violence, but touching from a relative when they were fairly young, and didn't know what to say to me, or didn't understand this person they trusted. So this is really personal, but more than that, I taught high school for years and years, and I want to protect kids. And it may include instruction in refusal skills. See, you do the opposite. That's what the conservatives like, refusal and not consent. But if it's just a matter of using different language, fine. I was an English teacher. I can find the words.
It's so true. That is so true.
So this is what I'll be promoting now. I have a draft, and I could share it with Stephanie and others and get input. I haven't finalized it. I mean, I really just want to get more eyes to see it, but not too many. And that's what I'll be running this year. So I'm not running a consent bill. Just remember that. I'm running a bill, a health education
Protection.
to see that kids learn about prevention and protection. This is prevention of young people, prevent them from sexual violence. And the statistics are frightening, and I will share those. 1 in 3 girls are sexually assaulted. Do you know the age, Stephanie? I'm not sure, by a certain age. And 1 in 6 boys. It's not just girls.
Oh,
So that's what I'm working toward, and I'm happy to have I have had so many people reach out to me since it failed last year by 6 votes in the House. Health education teachers, young women or older ones that have had things happen to them that if they'd had a better way of communicating
mhm.
and talking about it, might have been prevented. So that's what that will be a big focus of my work this next session.
Thank you, Carol.
Mhm.
Carol, I've heard via the grapevine that there's a book in the high schools at this point, I think, that is a book that, and I'm so sorry I don't remember the title, but it talks, it's from a child's perspective about what happens when you know something bad happened, but you're not sure exactly what it was, and you're not exactly sure who to tell. And it's from this child's perspective around sexual assault. And I've been hearing that there's a movement to get this particular book banned from our schools. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Okay, just one more thing. I think Ellen asked me if I was aware of Terry Palmer and her work with anti-trafficking. Yes, I'm working with her. We've met and we'll be working together on that. So the two really go together, absolutely.
Thank you, Carol. Hey, just 2 little housekeeping things. We are going to be voting at the end of this meeting for the leadership for Women's Democratic Club. So if you're a member, don't sign off early because we need your vote to make this happen. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And Jennifer Lee will be conducting that. And we have a winner on our call tonight. This is Ellen Burrell. Ellen, if you're there, we'd love to see you. Ellen won in Cottonwood. I don't remember what district it was, but she's now a representative in the Cottonwood district. So we're really, really thrilled with Ellen. We supported her and another candidate, Sean Newell, who also won in Cottonwood. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sean may be the first person of color to ever serve on the Cottonwood City Council. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's a pretty good bet for Sean. So congratulations to him as well. Catherine?
I just have a plug for Chelsea's, what she did on fixing the rape problem. I did put it into the chat, the link to her document that she prepared as part of her master's program. So
Nice.
she's not here, but that is a thing that is very close to her heart related, sexual assault and making changes in Utah.
All right. Thank you, Catherine, for putting that in there. All right. Now, I think I see Annabelle, but it says Jean Crockett. There's something wrong with this. This Annabelle Scheinberg from Planned Parenthood. I don't know. Are you trying to be incognito?
Yeah, I'm on the way to a play in my friend's car right now. So yes, it's me.
All right. Well, Annabelle, I'm going to let you give your quick pitch and you can talk about the meeting we're going to have in December. So go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Robin, and thanks everyone. I was asked to talk about how to lobby for abortion access in Utah. And I want to start with just saying I work for Planned Parenthood Action Council, Utah. My name is Annabelle Scheinberg, as Robin mentioned, and it's been exciting to get to work with the Women's Democratic Club. In December, we'll be doing an event. Chelsea and I are working on planning an event that will be a joint fundraiser for both groups. And we will be featuring a national speaker and a musical group. And we think it's going to be virtual just because COVID is what it is here. But we wish it could be in person. So stay tuned for information about that. But really, our tips for talking about abortion access in Utah, most of you probably know we are in what's called a red alert moment, right? Utah is one of 26 states that potentially could lose abortion access depending on the outcome of the Jackson v. Dobbs case, which is going to be argued December 1st at the Supreme Court. And we will hear the verdict on that case, which is a case brought by the one abortion clinic in Mississippi regarding a state law that was passed banning abortion after 15 weeks. We'll learn the outcome of that case in probably sometime June, we think, July possibly. As you know, the Supreme Court has an ambitious list of cases they're hearing this fall. So if they, for example, overturn Roe v. Wade or substantially undermine it, then we could be in a situation in Utah where Senator McKay's SB 174, the trigger ban bill, would go into effect, limiting abortion in most cases, except the exceptions, very few exceptions, right?
Annabelle, can you roll that back and just explain about that bill? Because I think people might not know what happened.
Absolutely. In 2020, in the legislative session, Senator Dan McKay ran a bill called SB 174, and that bill basically said if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then in Utah, most forms of abortion will be illegal, except sort of the traditional exceptions, which are rape, where you have to go to the police, right? Document rape, incest, life of the mother, and some fetal anomalies that are incompatible with life, or like complete vegetative state type ones. So it would severely limit. And in that case, Planned Parenthood and others would have to, you know, we're thinking about that kind of a future because we have to prepare, but we hope we don't get there. In that case, it would be supporting our patients or, you know, folks in Utah to access abortion through traveling to neighboring states where abortion access is more secure, right? So that could be Colorado, that could be Nevada, that could be California, because as you know, abortion laws are sort of a patchwork, right? So what we have found, we have done polling in 2020 with Dan Jones and Cicero. We've done some research with Lake Research Partners, Celinda Lake, who's a major progressive pollster that, you know, the Biden campaign used and many national organizations use. And we've developed some pro tips, okay? And one thing is that I just want to start with conventional wisdom about Utahns' attitude toward these issues is incorrect. Well, this is a conservative religious state, and those orientations are aligned with, not opposed to, reproductive freedom. Reproductive freedom is basically saying that people have the autonomy or the freedom to make decisions about if, when, and how to have children and start a family. And it's saying that all people have the right to control their sexual and reproductive health. It acknowledges and seeks to eliminate barriers to healthcare that many face, right? Due to systems that marginalize people of color, LGBTQ people, rural communities, people with disabilities, women, and people living in poverty. And it includes access to sexual and reproductive health care, like STI testing, like family planning, like a range of pregnancy options. And for people who choose to have children, reproductive freedom includes the right to raise one's family in a safe environment. Those concepts are not that out of line with what people here think. So what we want you to remember when you're talking about abortion with your policymakers is to really focus on people and make it clear that people, not the politicians or the government or the Supreme Court, should be making personal health care decisions. Okay, we don't need to label people, call some people antis or extremist. We really don't. We want to center people, and we want to talk about how these laws play out in everyday life when we put people first and share actual stories. People's stories, doesn't have to be our stories. Authentic experiences are a lot more powerful than hypotheticals. So stories of someone you know, stories of someone in your family, stories if you want to share some information from your own experience, that's okay too. And then use facts, not opinions. We know that facts are highly debatable. We know that stories can pull people more. Definitely say abortion or abortion care. Use the actual term. And remember that the real experts are patients and medical providers, not politicians with their own, other sort of agendas or other goals.
Oh, Annabelle, you muted.
I'm sorry, I hit the button. We want to make people feel empowered and motivated to change what's happening, right?
Mhm.
And we want to use the word decision rather than choice. If possible, and if it fits you and your values, you can use gender neutral language or inclusive language, right? Because we know people with a uterus access abortion care. For some people are comfortable speaking like that, some people are not, but it doesn't make our points any less powerful to say people need this kind of health care, and we can include more people in our conversation. And at the end, we know that there's certain values that are very widely held, right? Things like opportunity, health, well-being, fair treatment, respect. And so we want to lead with our values. We want to lead with values when we have these conversations. So for me, I believe that all people should have access to the health care they need. And abortion care is a kind of health care. And I believe that people should make these decisions about their health care with people they can trust, like their providers, like their doctors or nurse or someone close to them. And I believe that this should be, more affordable and more accessible, not less. So again, we can lead with values that are more universal. Dignity, community, freedom is a really good one. And it's not always talked about around abortion. So I just said a whole lot. Tell me if you have questions or if that's resonating with any of you, or what else you want to know.
Annabelle, I love that. And it's a perfect trailer to what Representative Moss was saying. We're not talking about consent anymore. We're talking about protection. And those, can you give us those words one more time? Because I just think those words we really need to focus in, because the language is so crucial right now. Yeah. Tell us again.
So, the core values you can lift up, right, that are commonly held: freedom, opportunity, health, well-being, fair treatment, right?
Yeah.
Respect.
Yeah.
Those are some things that you can center in your why. Okay. Yeah. And just
Annabelle,
yes.
when, in the hour of power, you talked a lot about using the word reproductive justice, didn't you?
I talked about using
freedom of choice,
reproductive freedom, because reproductive justice is really a term coined by Black women and women of color led organizations, and we can aspire to the values of the reproductive justice movement, and we can work towards those. I really feel like we don't own the language though, but it allows us to think about all of the things that come into play. If someone doesn't have a safe environment to raise their family, if someone doesn't have access to healthcare that's respectful, if someone doesn't have, a job that pays a fair wage, all of those things come into justice, right? And when we apply a justice lens to abortion, it brings a lot more people into the conversation, which is what we found with our rally. I think Katie has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. I was just curious if you've seen what impact has the whole vaccine and anti-vaccine movement had on this, because they use a lot of that same language, but in a very different way. And so I'm wondering if that's been beneficial or not.
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's a hard one. We know legislators, I'm sure Representative Moss is getting hundreds of emails that say my body, my choice, and they're about the vaccine, or they're about, yeah.
I know.
And so, so it's tricky. I feel like intersectionality can come into play, right? So just like COVID isn't the same for everyone, same thing with abortion and healthcare and decisions about pregnancy, that we have to acknowledge people's individual situations, but also we could lean in and say, well, sounds like we have some things in common here. I also have deeply personal values about this and deep feelings about this. I also feel that decisions about my body are my own. I think we may differ on who is impacted by our decisions, right? So while they may be very opposed to, right, terminating a pregnancy that involves a fetus that they consider a life, That's nothing like, for me, the difference maybe, I wouldn't say that's nothing like. The difference starts where if if somebody is unvaccinated and they attend a meeting or they attend something, it's unclear who's going to be impacted, right? I mean, the impact of those decisions is far-reaching, and it could affect a lot of people. But Katie, this is really important, and we actually, on our board retreat today at Planned Parenthood, we kind of want to come up with a little holiday discussion guide for Thanksgiving. Like, so you're sitting across from your relative who tells you, my body, my choice. Now what? But I'm really glad you asked that, and I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. And I would appreciate something like that.
Yeah, really. My body, my choice. Yes, ma'am. Carol Spackman Moss, Representative.
Well,
Moss.
and just to add one thing, again, we're talking about language, and I think pro-choice has become another one of those hot button words. Oh, you're pro-choice. Oh, you believe in killing babies. I think stay away from that term, don't you, Annabelle?
Yeah, we've really moved to decision and pro-abortion access, right? I think people should be able to actually get this kind of health care, because while we know it's a right, we know there's only 2 clinics in Utah where people could even come. And for a lot of people, it's too hard to drive that long. It's too hard to, I mean, if anything, we think it should be easier to get this, not harder.
And Annabelle, I know, at least from the discussions I've had with Joan Draper and you, it's kind of hard to know exactly where Utah is on the scale, but we have one of the lowest abortion rates in the nation. I mean, I think we could say that we're in the bottom 5 to 10%. I mean,
yeah, I like that, Robin. And we've made it so hard for people to actually get this kind of healthcare who need it. All Planned Parenthood is doing is providing, right? Like making sure that it exists and that people can still get it. But it's so challenging. There's so many hurdles with all of the trap laws that our legislature has passed.
Well, I'll tell you, it's to the credit of you and your organization that we are in that lower quartile, because people are getting birth control, they are getting counseling, they are getting healthcare. So that's a tremendous credit to you. Well, thank you, Annabelle. Are there any other questions for Annabelle before she goes to her play? Speak now or forever hold your peace, kind of thing.
Robin, I just have one question regarding the Texas. Thank you, Annabelle. Very helpful on language, definitely. What about the Texas vigilantism that I think reinforces what they're trying to do in Texas? And is that ruling going to come out before the Mississippi ruling?
Well, so November 1st, US v. Texas and the case brought on behalf of the providers in Texas were both, aspects of them were both heard at the Supreme Court, right? And so the question before the court is, will they let either of these cases proceed? We think the case more likely to proceed is the one brought on behalf of the providers, but we don't know. I mean, we're waiting to hear. So right now in Texas, the situation is dire and the vigilante law is in place. And people are not really able to access care if there's any fetal cardiac activity or after 6 weeks of pregnancy. And so, I mean, we do have a concern about a copycat bill here, but we also think Utah might just say, we have a trigger ban in place. We could wait and see what happens in May, or June when the Supreme Court issues their decision. Yes, we're here to eat. So
okay, thank you.
Is that what you wanted, Cal?
Yeah, I listened to the oral arguments, and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett were interesting on that. And I think one thing that may work in this state is if we become a country of vigilantism by law, that's not a big further step to vigilantism, period. And they talked about blue states going after guns
That's right.
as a parallel. So that may buy us some time. It doesn't solve the problem, but it was helpful to get your take on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm hopeful about that too, Cal. Anyway, thank you all on the call for all that you do. And I will be seeing some of you in December at our next event.
Yes, thank you, Annabelle. And we're going to be doing a fundraiser because, we've got fights here. in December. So everybody mark your calendar. I think it's December 4th. I can't tell you for sure, but I think it is. It's been a long day. Thank you very much. All right.
And I'm gonna step out as well. Thank you all. I have some children waiting for painting night. So
Painting night. Oh, I wish that was me. All right.
thank
Thank
you
you
all.
for joining us. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I'm really excited about our next speaker because she has done so much in our valley. Oh, Sue, are you from here? I'm introducing Sue Robbins. Sue, I'm going to ask you to do a little introduction of yourself, but I am curious to know if you are from Utah.
Not originally. So originally, I'm from the Northeast. My father was a Navy soldier. I was career Army. So I moved around a lot and landed here because of a marriage. I got married passing through, went away, finished my career, came back.
So
that's how it worked out.
Were you at Hill Air Force Base?
No, Defense Depot Ogden. We actually had an Army unit on there that was little known. We were hiding out.
Really? Well, Ogden.
And the Army.
We got to keep an eye on Ogden. It's just Ogden. So Sue, I want you to do a little introduction. I would like for you to kind of introduce yourself, and then we're going to talk about some bills coming up, I guess, in this legislative session about trans kids. And Sue has been such an advocate for our trans community. So I'll let you go, Sue. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm always glad to share because education is important to me. So my name is Sue Robbins, as we know. I am transgender and I am intersex, which we don't know a lot about the intersex community, but if you looked at it as a Venn diagram, there's a lot of overlap with the transgender community. So as an activist, I'm able to come forward for both communities with a lot of the issues. I've helped put together a group here in Utah for pre-transition transgender individuals. They had a safe place to go and process with people. I am a past board chair of the Utah Pride Center. I was chair while we went ahead and rebranded and bought the new location on 1300 South, which turned out to be an amazing building. And then I was board chair of Transgender Education Advocates of Utah, which is an education and advocacy organization, obviously. And also during both those times while I was board chair, I started working with Troy Williams at Equality Utah on transgender related legislation and policy at the state level. Then, as I stepped down from the Pride Center, I also started to take on a radio show with KRCL called Everyday People. I still have the sign here. I don't do it right now. I'm on hiatus from that while we're in the pandemic. But it was about lifting voices of the LGBT community primarily and its intersectional issues. So those are the things I've done. It's a testament to my privilege that I have that I'm able to do these things in a community that's heavily marginalized. And I recognize that. So coming up in this legislative session is going to probably be the toughest one for our community yet. First off, everybody can probably project there's going to be something coming in to impact schools. And that's going to hit us broadly. So they're going to be talking about CRT. They're going to be talking about how we must be indoctrinating our kids to have different sexual or gender variances. And it's, I'm sure there's going to be some ugly stuff there, and that'll be at the front end of the news. That one's a little hard to project, and it's going to be teamwork on the defense side for us because it's going to impact so many. So then the transgender specific bills, what we've had over the last 2 years. In 2020, we had Representative Daw bring a bill forward to remove healthcare for transgender youth, so transgender specific healthcare. And we also had Representative Robertson that was working a bill in the background that never got numbered to prevent transgender youth from participating in sports in their affirmed gender. Again, those two bills rolled over to the next year, but with different sponsors. Representative Shipp had it here in 2021 for the medical bill to prevent transgender healthcare for youth. And Representative Birkeland had the transgender sports bill, which she said protecting females in sports. And it was pretty ugly in a lot of the wording that we went through. And So what we expect now as the outcome coming forward to 2022, because these were all in the national spotlight, each one of these types of bills, along with another. The other is a situation where since 1975, we've been able to change the gender marker or the sex marker on our birth certificates by going to court. In 2016, a few judges stopped doing it, saying the law wasn't clear enough, and a lawsuit was put in place. In 2016, we worked with Senator Weiler to have an affirming bill go forward to make sure that we could codify it a little better. And then we ended up going against it because it started to get a few amendments in there that we could not support. The next year, Representative Merrill Nelson brought forward a bill, which I called the best sex education ever in Utah, because it described what male and female genitalia were and what they were used for in the bill. That never went forward for a vote. We were negotiating with him, and his firm stance was that sex is immutable, so birth certificates should never be changed. And he wanted to offer gender identity on a driver's license. And we said, that's not good because it just outs you as transgender if you have that on there. And we need the birth certificate because that's universal across the United States. And to his credit, because we couldn't come to an agreement, he dropped the bill. He went ahead and set it aside and left it there. So I thanked him for that. But now we finally, it took a few years, but we finally had the Supreme Court decision here in Utah this summer that said the judges should have been giving marker changes on birth certificates. So it instructed the judges for the two plaintiffs to go ahead and give them and award them that sex marker change that they requested. So now the law of the land in Utah is transgender individuals can change their birth certificate without any blockage other than the standard rules that would apply to a name change. Like if you're on the sex offender registry or if you're trying to do it for fraud. And so now he's trying to bring back his bill, and we'll see if he does. He's said it verbally that he wants to run it. I think he's waiting for support from organizations like the church and others to give him a sign on whether he should proceed before he goes forward with it. So we'll see if that one comes forward. Right now, I don't think, or we don't feel that that one would get a lot of support because we have solid rule of law. We have a ruling by the Supreme Court, and we're pretty much in the same situation across all 50 states where we all do the same thing. So why would we want Utah to be different? And why would we want to start changing IDs when we're conforming with the Real ID Act and we have all kinds of impacts that could apply across the US if you're trying to go to university or join the military? So that one's one possibility. The next possibility is we expect Representative Shipp to come back with his transgender youth medical ban. And the way this has gone, both years, this has gone really poorly for the sponsors. When Representative Daw had his, we were bringing youth in to talk to him and doctors, and he kept changing his bill to take things out of it because he started to see the impact of what he might do. And when he got to the end, he had changed the bill all the way to doing a $30,000 study. And I believe when it hit the floor, we had those on the Democrat side that said, we don't need to do this because that stuff already exists. And those on the Republican side that said, this is a trans bill, let's not do it. Why spend money for them? And it went down pretty hard. This last year, Representative Shipp went to bring a bill forward and it stayed in rules for a better part of the session. He went ahead and put an amendment in to soften the language up. It came out of rules, went to the HHS committee, where he put an amendment to put it right back where it was originally. The committee had the hearing on it and they voted to send it back to rules, which appears to have been the slap that he shouldn't have tried to reverse it from what he had done to get it out of rules in the first place. So they said, if you're going to have it where it was stuck in rules and put it back in that wording, we're going to send it right back to rules and leave it there. So I think he might have made some people pretty unhappy, and he may pay for that still yet this year. But on a general sense, this one is a difficult one for anybody to push forward because all we have to do is say, why are you getting between a doctor and the parents on decisions around the healthcare of their kids? And that's a pretty strong case across both parties. We also show that the American Medical Association, the Endocrine Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics all support transgender healthcare. That doesn't necessarily bias everyone, because there is a phony advocacy organization out there called the American College of Pediatrics that has a lot of really incorrect and hateful information they put out there. And there are some people that listen to that and they use that for their guidance. So on the whole, I think that one's not going to have a strong case going forward. Then the third one is the sports bill. Yes, Representative Moss, did you want to speak on that one before I move on to the next bill? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you, so I don't know if you want me to keep going.
Go ahead. I
Okay.
want to say something at the end to give a little hope. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So the last one is the sports bill. And this one, when Representative Robertson did it, it was just a little bit of a spiral and never really got anywhere. So the key was when Representative Berkman brought it up this year. And her approach was that she wanted to protect female sports because she felt like those with male biology were coming in and dominating girls' sports and taking away their opportunities for scholarships and to be able to win. Early on, we were able to soften some of her language with her, which I appreciate, because the male biology is the approach that they're using nationally to try and turn people against the transgender community. And I basically say it's trying to draw a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger going into our girls' sports and tossing them around, because they're trying to make this picture that all transgender girls are going to be these big behemoths that are going to overwhelm all the other girls. Now, we saw this kind of discrimination a couple decades ago when it came to women of color, where there was this discrimination saying, look at them, they're more physically fit, it's not fair for them to compete with other women. So we've been down this road. And I actually have a book where the Olympics has been doing policies on transgender and intersex participation since the 1930s. So this isn't new. We've been down this a lot. It's just something to fight about right now. So in all our discussions with Representative Berkman and the committee, we made a strong point that one of the things that makes this the most difficult thing to talk about is the lack of education, in particular medically, how a transition impacts transgender bodies. So we were fairly successful in getting her to have some meetings throughout interim. And we have had 4 meetings with her. And in those meetings, we've had a lot of participation. We've had the AG's office, we've had the governor's office, we've had Senator Adams' office, we've had multiple legislators that have been coming, a few for the last 2 meetings and a few for all 4 meetings, along with a few other organizations like the Utah High School Athletics Association. And I think the meetings went the way I expected them to, which is we were able to do some education, but we didn't get far enough. In my sense, and I said it at the beginning of the year, is that I'd appreciate a year to be able to educate everyone, but I think we need 3, because there's so much to move people on that 4 meetings doesn't move people. So what we were able to do throughout the meetings is show that there's a lot of difficulty with any type of policy that they can put in. If they do a blanket exception, then easily it could go against Title IX based on Judge Gorsuch's statement when we had Bostock versus Clayton County that said on Title VII, sex includes sexual orientation and gender identity because you can't separate those from sex. So they're both parts of the Civil Rights Act, so it's very easy to take any kind of decision with Title VII and apply it to Title IX. Additionally, there's also the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And in fact, we have 10 bills that have passed across the United States so far. 8 of them have lawsuits against them, and there's 2 injunctions in place so far. And both of them use the 14th Amendment and Title IX as the reason for the injunctions. And we also had an injunction last year against Idaho, because Idaho was the first one to get out there with this. So what I expect, the bill is going to come out in interim on Wednesday morning. It is still showing on the website as B&N draft. So I don't know what the wording will look like. What I expect Representative Birkeland to go for, based on our discussions of where we were ending up, is she's going to want birth certificates to be changed and the youth to be on some type of hormone therapy before they can participate in female sports. For male sports, it's almost like it's okay if anybody participates in male sports because you need to be tough enough to do that. So flex and go over there no matter what your hormones are, no matter what your size are. But over on the girls' side, we need to have some very strong rules because our fragile flowers kind of thing. It's really quite a dissonance when you listen to how some of this works. Now, if she goes with that bill, a very interesting note, if we get all three of these bills, is Representative Nelson wants to take away our birth certificates, Representative Shipp wants to take away our hormone therapy, and then Representative Birkeland wants to use the birth certificate and hormone therapy for us to participate in sports. So the bills don't even coincide with each other. They're completely conflicting. So it's going to be an interesting path. When we had the last committee hearing on the sports bill, the Jazz, we heard later that the Jazz had been in the governor's office saying drop it. We had the University of Utah and a couple other universities in there. We had the American Academy of Pediatrics. We had Silicon Slopes, just a number of organizations that came in and said, don't do this. So we expect that same level of support again, which means this is not a popular bill. But I also think out of the three, this is the one where they may look to finally get their pound of flesh because they always feel like they're losing to the LGBT community. We get the bills we want, or we at least block the bad ones over the last several years. So that's the one where our greatest concern is, and not knowing which way it'll go. And the fact that we feel like there's still a lot more education makes it our greatest concern. So Representative Moss, if you want, I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to say, Sue, when you were growing up, did you think that you would end up your life as just an incredible lobbyist?
And that's a comment I did on Facebook recently. It's like I stayed in the closet my whole life, and then I finally decided I'm going to transition and live my life as me. And instead, I transition and live my life as an activist because I have to, because of the attacks.
I know.
And at some point, I'll get a chance to be me, but it feels like I'm being me as an activist instead of me as Sue.
Well, you are fabulous, and thank you so much for your work for all our children. Representative Moss.
Well, I just want to second what you said, Sue. If you're not on Twitter, you should know that she is very active and she's put such intelligent things on there. And you really are so effective, Sue. But what I wanted to add that I think there's a glimmer of hope, and you mentioned it briefly. I really think that phone call from the president of the Jazz changed that. When he said we won't get the NBA 2022 basketball championships if that transgender bill passes, either one. Woo-hoo! I think that shut it down. But I went to the Silicon Slopes legislative breakfast. You may have read a little bit about it. Oh. And the first man that stood up at my table to the mic after the panel is the CEO of one of those startups. I can't think of it. I can't remember any of their names, or the names of their companies. But he said, he mentioned that bill. Why do you pass bills like that? Why do you pass something about pornography is the biggest health crisis? He said, we're trying to recruit people from out of state, and you don't make our job any easier. And afterwards, some of us, Democrats at least, talked to some of them. And I said, you can have an outsized influence. They're starting a PAC. And those are things that they do not like. They consider the message bills, and they put Utah on the fringe of weirdness. Mm-hmm. And if anybody has an influence on the Republicans, it's the business community, and they love the tech guys. Until they criticize them that day. The president of the Senate and the House Speaker weren't real happy. You could tell by their responses. But seriously, this is where we can get leverage.
Amen. Yeah, that Silicon Slopes pack. I mean, look out for that. They're organizing, they're strong, and they're going to make a difference.
Yeah, Sunny Washington's been in contact with us, the WDC. So we just want to let everyone know
Yes.
that we want to have a long-term relationship with them and support what they're doing. I also would say that NAMI has been significantly against the Berkman, I'll call it the Berkman bill for lack of a better wording, but definitely NAMI has come out specifically against that in relationship to suicide prevention and what they're doing along with the coalition. So we have a lot of people that are against those bills.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you brought up the Silicon Slopes. They were very defensive. It's like, you don't tell us how to do a legislature, we won't tell you how to run your business. What they pick up and leave, then they'll be interested. And it's one of those, I got employee resources groups started in my company, which is a tech company, by saying it is a business interest to be able to have families that are safe in your communities and to be able to have LGBT individuals available in your recruiting pool because you want to bring the best talent in. And if you push away a percentage of them, and LGBT people love our tech sector, we get into computers especially, then you have less of a recruiting pool to pull in. And I'll tell you right now, it is hard to hire people right now. I have a team that I'm at 50% strength, and I barely am getting trickles of resumes. So it is very much a business interest to be able to have every person available to us. And that's the capitalistic side of things instead of the personal side of things, but I'll take every piece of that.
Yeah.
And Sue, what I forgot, that same fellow that I told you what he said, I have transgender people working for me. So this is the angle, I think. Like you say, too bad they wouldn't, you can't persuade them on the basis of how it harms individuals.
Right.
Talk about economics.
Yeah. We'll take our wins where we can get them.
Yeah, and to put a piece together on the Jazz, because we heard about the Jazz in the news long after they had been in the office of the governor. And one of the things that we also heard later was Dwayne Wade became a part owner of the Jazz. Now, obviously, something like that doesn't happen immediately. So when they went in the governor's office, they knew he was going to become a part owner, at least had that sense. Dwayne Wade has an amazing transgender daughter named Zaya that he and his wife, Gabriella Union, has advocated for. So maybe we could get a Paris Hilton type of testimony at one of our committees. Who knows? I'll take everything we can get here.
I love that.
But I feel like right now the transgender community across the nation has been used to rile up people because they don't understand us. So it's really about education. So it's not as much just stating that we want to be against bills, is if you understand the transgender community, passing on that education to your representative is what we need, because they are getting bad information by way of the Eagle Forum, which gets it from ALEC, which gets it from the Alliance Defending Freedom. And they're the ones that are feeding all this bad information every state. And you can see that the bills are boilerplate bills across the United States.
Yeah. Thank you, Sue. That was fabulous. I mean, we are all hanging in there with you. I just want you to know we're behind you 135, 40%.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be there. We'll be there.
It'll be a vacation in March.
Okay. All right. Well, we're running just a little bit slow, but the last of our little get together tonight is for those of us who don't know how to do this. And I confess, I am just a novice here. I've asked Catherine Votaz to give us all a little basic primer on how to get into the legislative site, how to follow these bills, how to know what's going on, because we do have an incredible website. We just don't know quite yet how to use it. So Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then Jennifer Lee, you are right after that, and we're going to take a vote. All right, Catherine.
Can you allow me to screen share?
I hope I do. Do I have